The Bobby O Show.
Welcome to the Bobby O Show. My name is Bob O. Potzner. I'm an attorney at the law firm of Collins and Hannafin in Danbury, Connecticut. I'm a litigator, and I have a show that I think is very appropriate now that we're a few days away from the 4th of July, a critical holiday to our American democracy as we strive and fight to keep the democracy going. Today I have a current president and a former president of the Danbury Bar Association, and they will explain to us what the association is and what the lawyers do who are part of the association, and they will, I'm sure, discuss a little bit about the rule of law. So I'll have you introduce yourselves first. Geraldine.
Hi, my name is Geraldine Macaisa, and I'm also in Collins Hannafin as an associate attorney. And I'm the current president of the Greater Danbury Bar Association.
Hail to the chief.
Thank you.
And you, did you have prior offices before you were president at the Danbury Bar Association?
I served as vice president this past year, so now I'm moving on up to president.
Moving on up.
Yeah.
And we also have John Bowser. Go ahead, John.
Hi, I'm John Bowser. I am the past president of the Danbury Bar Association from 2018 to 2019. I've been on the board of the Bar Association since 2016. For the last 5 years, I've been working as co-chair of the Law Day celebration, which we celebrate on the first Friday in May. And I was fortunate enough to previously have appeared on the Bobby O Show to discuss that event.
And I also was chairman of the Law Day for about 4 years, and that's a very important part of what the Bar Association does. Why don't you just very briefly, John, just tell us what the Law Day activities are about, why we have it, and what it's all about.
Sure. So Law Day, it's interesting, was actually started during Dwight Eisenhower's presidency. It was adopted by the American Bar Association, and the intent of Law Day was as a juxtaposition to the military parades that were happening in Russia on May Day, which is traditionally the Communist Workers' Party's day. And when they would celebrate with military parades, we instead in America would celebrate the rule of law in our society. So on the first Friday in May of every year, local bar associations get together. We typically bring children to our local courthouses and introduce them to how the justice system works, and we give a few awards and proclamations to both lawyers in the community, to individuals in the community who've contributed in some way to the rule of law or to helping to establish or attain the American dream. And we also award up-and-coming high school students who take place in mock trial or similar events. So
my favorite award is the American Dream Award, and I came to Danbury to practice law in 1990, so that's what, 35 years ago. And I wasn't really aware of it. I was in the Bridgeport Bar before that, about how important the Law Day festivities were. And Danbury has been one of the areas where it's been very, very important, and it's been a part of our legal system for those years. But when I heard about the American Dream Award, I love that award. Geraldine, what's the American Dream Award? Do you know what the criteria is for that?
That's an award that you are first generation American that is practicing law. Or that's my understanding of it.
Yeah,
anyway.
and that's exactly right. And I think it's a very important, and now where our society is today, to me, it's even more germane to what we do to award people. And in fact, I did a show several years ago when I was doing it under the 30 Minutes title, and I did it with Patty Cruz, who was born out of the United States in Portugal, and Justice Khan, who's on the Supreme Court of Connecticut, who was born, I think, in Angola.
Yes.
And so to me, it's a very, very important activity. I actually believe that there ought to be a fourth award, which would be called not the Bobby O Award, but the fourth award. The fourth award would be not.
Who would win?
That would be a better one. Right? The American Dream, I think,
Bobby
it's only for people who are born outside the United States of America. I think we should have a similar kind of award for people who come from backgrounds that are difficult. For example, Rachel Levine, who was a foster child for many years and is now a very successful lawyer. I think those
Who's
kinds
currently on the board of the Danbury Bar
Right.
She's now secretary.
She's now secretary, and I just think that kind of award also should be considered, not to take away from the American Dream Award, but to augment it.
It's incredibly difficult to, the famous phrase is to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but to attain a law degree and to dedicate yourself to the practice of law and to living in our civil society and enforcing laws, whether that is as a member of law enforcement, whether that's a member of the judiciary, whether that's an attorney. But it's given the rising cost of education and living, it's getting harder and harder. And I absolutely agree that it's important to recognize those people because the contribution themselves is proportionate to the sacrifice they're making, which increases every year.
Geraldine, who's a member of the Danbury Bar Association? Maybe an obvious question, but who's entitled to belong? Is it just lawyers?
Yes, so anyone who is a lawyer. Right now we're trying to see if we can expand that group because there's, even just law students or kind of getting more kind of involvement from the community because right now it seems like we are in a rebuilding type of period with, trying to replace the attorneys that are retiring and trying to get more members because, kind of goes to the point of how important this organization is to bringing awareness of the rule of law. And so kind of having more people from different backgrounds included, it's kind of to show that it's not just practicing attorneys and kind of be anyone with a law degree or those thinking about becoming a lawyer.
Actually, when John mentioned the different awards for the Law Day activities, one award is for non-lawyers, essentially, who do things to help the law. The membership of the Bar Association in Danbury, as in the other judicial districts, the state has developed into different judicial districts, is membership of lawyers who are in the greater Danbury area, more or less.
Yes.
And that's part of it. And I will say to you, when I first came to the Danbury area, Danbury Bar Association, I would say that maybe in a festivity like the Law Day luncheon, you might get 75 or 100 people there. And now it's a much smaller participation than it was. And I'm thinking what you're talking about perhaps is outreach, and maybe are you talking about getting more members who are lawyers or getting more people who are law related? Is that some of the conversation being done?
Yeah, I think both. We recognize that there could be, seeing kind of how important these events are and just kind of trying to get people to participate, more than just going to an event, but actually being part of the planning of certain events. Or, I always hear stories about how, the events used to be hundreds of people, and then you kind of see the small but strong, group of attendees, but, it's important to kind of show why it's important to be part of the group. And kind of also, I think, being a younger individual, a lot of people kind of say, well, what can it do for me? And it's done a lot, and it can do a lot if you put the time in and to be, networking and getting out there, but it's also how do you kind of think about that in certain ways.
Sure.
I'm going to have an odd comment. I went to the election when you got elected a couple weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, whatever, and I was pleased that there were about 35 people there, more or less, and I didn't know at least a third of the people there. Now that may say, why is he happy to know the people there? Well, first of all, I don't know most of the people who aren't litigators, but I saw a lot of younger people, people like your age, who I didn't really know, and it's nice to see the growth in the community by having the older people, and I'm one of the older people, I guess. Quit laughing, John. But it's nice to see younger people who we didn't really know who are getting more and more involved. John, any comments about that?
You're bringing up an interesting point about demographics, and I would like to comment on that for a second. Number one, the first thing to bring up is that the 2005-2006 year is actually the Danbury Bar Association's 100th anniversary. The fact that there have been an organization of lawyers in Danbury for 100 years now says a lot to our community and the establishment of an organization of lawyers and like-minded individuals. But number two, there is a demographic shift. 50 years ago, there were maybe 10 attorneys in town. 30 years ago, there was a boom of 100 attorneys in town. Now that number's gone back down again. To seek quality legal counsel, a lot of people choose instead to go to Hartford or New Haven or even into New York. But the fact is that there are extremely qualified, extremely dedicated individuals in the greater Danbury area who can answer those questions, oftentimes for a fraction of the price, I hesitate to say. But also the fact that those people, going back to what I said before, the sacrifice that they've made to practice in this area, in this community, is well worth noting.
I'll say two things. First of all, it is not true that I'm a charter member of that bar association. I have not been a member for 100 years. So I just want to get that clear, that I'm not a charter member.
And your white wig.
That's right, white wig. And number two, I want to say that I think that COVID has had a lot of impact on our society. And I remember in March of 2020, I was getting a case ready for trial, and we settled it that day, and the following week, COVID closed the courthouses. But now we have the offset of COVID, and a lot of things in the court system happen remotely. It's Microsoft Teams, what we use in the court system, but that's been 5 years, and people are getting more and more away from being in court all the time. And so if you don't see all your friends, and I call the people that member the bars primarily professional friends, some are personal friends, but if you see, hey John, hey Joe, whatever, in the courthouse, you have a connection. If you don't see people as often and you get stuck in your remote office, people are less involved to have organizational activities. Churches and synagogues are having those kinds of problems for a lot of those reasons. Any comments about that, Geraldine?
Well, it's definitely the disconnect. I mean, we're used to, when I graduated law school in 2019 and then COVID happened, it didn't really incentivize someone like myself to go out and be part of these groups. Your time became very much precious, and you kind of recognize that. And so after work, you want to go home, you want to, do your hobbies. You don't want to spend your time sometimes going out to dinner, schmoozing, and because it's sometimes when I talk to my friends, they just don't feel like that's an important part about being an attorney. They get their work done and then they go home and then they can kind of do whatever else they kind of want to do. And I feel like they never develop the relationships with the other members, and also it's money and time. It's what's the value of me going to a dinner, paying this much money when I can kind of do something else with my time, and so it's.
The thing that's interesting, by the way, is that when you're in law school, I never took a course called networking. I learned about civil procedure, contracts, all different kinds of the law, but not networking. And then when I found out as a young lawyer, when I came to a firm, all of a sudden it's an expectation that eventually you're going to develop your own practice. And I think you should comment about John. And
the fact is, there is a bottom line, real world downstream consequence to small associations like this that you just don't get in New Haven or even in Fairfield. The fact that we are professional colleagues with the practitioners that we speak to on a monthly basis, sometimes even on a weekly basis, right, means that attorneys may be better equipped to resolve your issues because we have more experience with those colleagues, and therefore at the end of the day we can get a better outcome for our clients and maybe even save them legal fees in the long run because we kind of anticipate. We know the particular ways in which our opponent, who happens to be our colleague, right, is familiar with, and what tactics work best, what explanations work best to really get the best outcome. So this is not just good for them, they get together and it's a Bull Moose Lodge sort of a situation. Not at all. There's real life consequences to this networking skill, and not only for us, not only for our clients, but also for a lot of young people in the community. We have had people approach the GDBA and say, hey, I would like to come to a meeting. I'm a first-year law student, or I'm thinking about going into law school. I'd like to talk to some of the lawyers about this, and they're always welcome to come to one of our meetings.
It's funny, when I was a very young lawyer, even younger than you perhaps, there was a lawyer in Bridgeport named Joe Mirsky. Joe Mirsky was an old-time lawyer, and he would come to court with a pad like this. I have a whole page pad here, and he'd have clients' names on it in the corners, whatever. He was kind of always carried cash on him. He was we kind of laughed him a little bit, but more with him than at him. But one day, Joe Mirsky saw this other lawyer, for some reason, yelling at me. I'm not sure why. And without even saying a word, Joe Mirsky said, hey, don't yell at my friend Bobby O. He's your opposition, he's not your enemy. he's your opposition, not your enemy. And it ties to what you guys are saying, because if you see lawyers every day in the courthouse, you talk about different things. You know, I know the lawyers in town, their kids, and where they go to school.
Right.
Everyone knows I'm a Dookie basketball fan or Yale basketball fan, whatever. You all know, you know, our different interests, and it's important. The thing that you said, Geraldine, kind of bothered me, not your opinion, but what the truth is, and that is this kind of perspective more, and I hate to say it's in the younger generation, which is, it's more about the Me Tooism. You know, it's like going to a bar dinner, what's it do for me? And in the Bar Association of Danbury, I'm going to test your knowledge, both of you guys. I went through the website today just to make sure I was going to not be tripped up by you guys. And what it says in the website is, on the Danbury Bar Association, our shared goals are to promote professional camaraderie, which you guys have mentioned today, and collegiality among the bench and bar, facilitate a just and accessible legal system for the residents of the greater Danbury area, and provide valuable services and benefits to our members and to the entire community, which you folks both have said in a positive way, which ties to a topic I wasn't going to get into, but I will. And that is the cases that we've had in the United States right now, where our president has tried to force certain law firms, the big law firms, to either do what the president wants them to do and not represent certain kind of issues, or not be allowed to go to the federal courthouse because some of the people have represented people opposing President Trump. Any comments from either or both of you about the fact that there's issues, and the Supreme Court has come out quickly on anyone who didn't settle those issues in support of the law firms, not the United States government? Either of you want to have a comment about what you think about law firms saying, yes, Mr. President, I'm not going to represent certain people, or yes, Mr. President, I won't take people in my law firm who have represented issues against me? Any comments? Open the floor. Geraldine, Jonathan, John?
I'll go first in order to give Geraldine time to put her thoughts together on this issue. What I will say is, occasionally as part of my practice, I handle banking law, and I've been involved in a lot of foreclosures in my time. And one of the things that foreclosure mortgagee bank plaintiffs are very concerned about is not necessarily the individual case, but rather the precedent that that case may set. So I see it in the issues of law firms, volunteering a certain amount of hours to the executive branch. I also see it in the, I think as of today, recently settled case of CBS, where they settled for $16 million with the president with regards to a 60 Minutes episode that aired prior to the election. And that is that, yes, you may be resolving this issue in what you think is your favor, but you are also harming both yourself in the future and everyone else downstream who has a similar issue, because you are setting a negative precedent by giving somebody what they want without really putting up a major legal fight about it. And in point of fact, from what I've heard from experts, I'm personally not an expert on any of these areas of law, but the litigants on the opposite side of the government stood a fairly good chance of having succeeded had they agreed to fight those battles out.
Very good chance. Very good chance. When I was in law school, we had at Duke, we had small sections, and we all took all our classes together, but we each would have, each section, there were about 5 different sections, would have one professor who was their reading and writing professor. And mine was in torts, which is like personal injury, defamation, and we studied for 1 full year the First Amendment. Our big paper was about the First Amendment. There's a case called New York Times versus Sullivan, which is the seminal case on free speech. And one of the key premises of that whole line of cases is that if you're a public figure, that would be someone who's elected, a public official, someone who might be in the news because of some action they took, whatever, to become more of a public person, then in order to win a defamation or a libel or slander case against someone who's a public figure, you have to have a very strong standard, knowing falsity, reckless disregard for the truth. And what we're seeing by having CBS settle the case, I didn't realize they settled today, and so they're paying money. I think they would have had a great chance of being successful because of the presidential campaign. And this is, again, part of the rule of law being attacked.
Well, and hours later, I have to say, just before we came on the air today, I saw that the president is now threatening CNN with a similar lawsuit over some of their reporting. So obviously, it's had the opposite of a chilling effect, where now the executive is emboldened to continue with these free speech lawsuits.
Jill, do you have any comments about this topic?
I mean, the first kind of thing that pops in mind just feels very dystopian, when you have journalism, which is supposed to be, I was on my school newspaper in high school, and you learn about how important it is to be able to have these stories, have the freedom to be able to, speak the truth without having any barriers of fear. And the fact that the journalists in, CBS or even CNN don't even have the backing of their own network or publisher. I mean, that could really, kind of just limit how much they want to actually be out there and be a voice of truth, essentially.
When I was 23 years old, I was on the Board of Education in Shelton, and we had 3 newspapers, Shelton, Connecticut, that is, 3 newspapers, New Haven Register, the Bridgeport Post, and the Evening Sentinel from Ansonia, and actually a 4th one, the Shelton newspaper, and they were at every single meeting, and they were a phenomenal watchdog. You go fast forward now you only have like one of those papers around, you have fewer newspapers, and most of the papers are national, for example, the Danbury News-Times doesn't have a lot of local news. They have some, but they don't have a lot like they used to have, and that's all part and parcel of our democracy. I want to ask you a question getting back into the DBA specifically. Mm-hmm. Do you have any plans in terms of how you're going to try to get more members into the organization? Is that something that's being worked on now or discussed? Any comment about that?
I mean, it's definitely something that we, even just from last year, talking about what events can we put together that isn't formal, something that we could have more of a social aspect that doesn't take a lot of planning, but then can also be kind of, I don't want to say lure, but kind of attract more membership. We are thinking about doing, that's kind of how we want to plan it, because
Sure.
I think for younger people, kind of having more informal meetups versus dinners, formalized dinners, might be able to get them kind of out of their shell, meet members, and kind of in a way that can kind of show what the benefits of the membership are, more community outreach.
Gets to the collegiality. When I came to Danbury in 1990, there was a very strong lawyers league for softball. It was a co-ed league, and we had several law firms. Cohen Wolf had a team, Collins Hannafin had a team, Martin Borowski, who's passed away, but his firm had a team with now Michael Coffin's firm. And plus the courthouse had a couple of teams. And that was a good way to have interaction. I think it's a good idea that you're having to do some more informal activities. John, you were president years ago. What kinds of things were you thinking about, or are you thinking about to try to get more involvement from them?
Well, it's interesting. Despite my boyish good looks, I am a little bit older than Geraldine, mm-hmm. and so you'll notice that there really is a generational gap between when I was president 7 or 8 years ago and when she's president now. At that time, we were subject to an aging bar, and we were really at the precipice of this sort of mass retirement that we're still seeing the effects of, where an entire generation decided to sort of hang up their spurs at the same time. We tried to have sort of informal events. I'll recall at one point we went to, I think it was a Danbury Trashers game, and I think all of 5 people showed up to that. So the real trick is to have your finger on the pulse of the median membership of your group, and I think Geraldine is doing a tremendous job of that. But in addition to that, the GDBA does, in addition to formal events and informal events, we also host a number of continuing legal education credit courses so that people can enrich their own knowledge. We have a host of events that are important, for all of our members, and really important for the community to know about.
Let me also add the following, and that is, as the president and former president of the Bar Association, there are things you should do, but the burden's on us too. I'm not an officer of the DBA, but I go every year, although I ran the law day several years, but I go every year to law day activities. I think it's for us to realize that we have an obligation as lawyers to do more than just worry about my own billable hours, and we all have families and other activities that we do, et cetera. But I mean, we as lawyers have to understand our obligations to be out there and to do different things that are going to help the community and volunteer. If I went through all your activities, I bet each of you have something you do that's dear and near to you that's not part of the law. You want to give me an example of something you do outside the law?
So I'm heavily involved with the Filipino Association of Western Connecticut. I do Filipino folk dancing, I do hula dancing. I'm also a board member on the Friends of the Danbury Museum and Historical Society. And so those are things that I feel can connect me to,
People.
Yeah,
Connection to people. You know, by the way, I didn't know you do Filipino folk dancing. If I had more time, I would have had you do some dancing for you. You didn't tell me that before the show. But see, those activities, and I'm sure you get involved, and there's a question that comes up on any of those organizations. Oh, you're a lawyer, I got a question for you. And you know, I was on the Board of Ed for 15 years, 9 years in Shelton and 6 years in Richfield. And as a lawyer, we add two things. John, do you have something you want to tell about what you do outside the
Well, I have
law?
2 small children, so that is...
They're not that small. Your son's a pretty tall kid.
He's a big boy, but he's still fairly young. So I'm on the Bethel Education Foundation. We throw... First, our primary goal is to create scholarships for Bethel students, but we throw the annual Beer Fest coming up this year on August 2nd, actually, as well as a charity fundraiser in March of every year in order to create those, and I'm very happy to be involved in the board. And generally in my kids' lives, I'm a professional taxi driver to piano lessons and baseball practice and gymnastics. And
Do you serve Dr. Pepper for those of us who don't drink at your beer festival?
only for you. You have to get your tickets in advance if you want access to the Dr. Pepper tent.
I don't drink alcoholic beverages, never have. And I went to a fundraiser for WestCon's volleyball, girls volleyball team. And they had it at a bar, wherever they make beer, pub, whatever. And I walked in and I said, by the way, do you have any soda? And they gave me a funny look. I don't know if it was the way I looked or what it was. We have about a minute left. Geraldine, as the current president, does anyone want to say to me or us about the Bar Association or anything you think is important as to why the DBA is important to this community?
It's important because it really brings people together, and it also is, I know we're running out of time, so check out the website.
Take your time. What is the
Okay.
website?
So the website is danburybar.org. You can, join.
One more time, do it. Danbury?
danburybar.org.
Okay.
And you can join there. You can read more about, membership. But I think this bar association is important because it's getting to know people, and it's especially in today's world, understanding what law is, even for those who don't, readily understand it or think it's accessible. It's important to know that there's a community of people that are there for everybody, and so.
And also, there's also the Connecticut Bar Association. I'm a member of 2 executive committees statewide, so people get involved both locally and statewide, and it's very, very helpful to get involved statewide in the CBA because you meet lawyers out of your area, and I think it's very important to know what we do here and what they do there.
I'm on the CBA, very quickly, Board of Governors and the House of Delegates for our area. Go to cba.org if you have the host of things there that are accessible to the public are entirely different than the DBA. But I strongly recommend anyone who is in need of a lawyer to go to either of those websites, and they will help you find someone who specializes in your issue in our area.
Geraldine and John, thank you for coming on the show today. You've been very helpful, and I think you've presented a very personable approach to the Bar Association and what we do for the community and for fellow lawyers. This has been Bob Potzner on The Bobby O Show. Have a great day and enjoy your 4th of July weekend. And happy birthday, John.